Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pascal Mezai. I'm one of the recruitment manager at SUMAS, and I'll be hosting this session today with Dr. Mehmet Ulug, one of our sustainable experts in finance and in a lot of different things, but finance for today, that would be the main topic. As a quick introduction, I'd like to start by giving you a quick roundup about the school, about SUMAS itself, what we do, and the program that we do offer. So, as you may know, SUMAS is the first school that was offering bachelor, master, and MBA with a focus on sustainability and business management, as previously you were only allowed to work in sustainability through the scope of engineering or environmental science or science in general. So it was really creating that third way where business could be also driving sustainability moving forward. The campus itself, the first one was started in Gland 10 years ago in the headquarters of the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And we've been also opening a new campus 2 years ago in Milan, where Mehmet is actually teaching at the moment. These campuses are offering the same program, the same majors, and in the same language, English on both of them. For those of you that would be interested as well, there's an online option that would be available to continue your studies or to do part of your study if interested. The online campus offer a lot of flexibility because the full program would be entirely asynchronous, and that means you can study at your own pace. The schedule would be from Monday to Monday, and you would have part of the tutorial being given, as well as later on some of the assignment and exam to be completed. For those of you interested in an even more flexible option, it's possible to study both on campus and online by completing at least a semester on campus and either start with the classes online or finish with the classes online after your on-campus experience. This way, you would get to meet the team, have the campus experience, but also benefit from the flexibility probably required for some of your work to actually study and work at the same time. In terms of the program, we have, so the main program that we do offer, you see the undergraduate program, the bachelor, as well as graduate program, master, MBA, Certificate of Advanced Studies, and we offer up until the Doctorate of Business Administration. For the Bachelor of Business Administration, so the program is 3 years, fully in English, with a start possible every February and September, with 32 core modules, 9 specialization courses in 5 different specializations, namely sustainability management, sustainable fashion management, sustainable tourism, sustainable hospitality, and sustainable finance. Each year, students are also invited to take part in the experiential camp, and they would take part in company project. It's also a possibility for students to complete an optional internship after graduation. Then one of the program available is the Master of Art in Management. In terms of the duration, that would be the same for the MBA, but I'll get to it in a moment. So it's a 1 year on campus, and you join also on February and September for a new start in 2 semesters. So you can graduate within 1 year. If you are keen on the online program, this could take 18 months up to 3 years. So that explanation is because you can retake all the module at least once, and you have 4 start dates per year: January, April, July, and October. So January is still now down the road from us. It's in coming weeks. We're still receiving application for this, and it's still possible to register if you're interested to do so. Every term, every quarter, you would have 2 to 3 courses scheduled, and we assume it takes 4 or 5 hours per module per week in terms of time commitment. For the master, you can take 4 of the majors that we offer: sustainable management, sustainable fashion management, sustainable hospitality, and sustainable tourism. Then for the MBA, so the duration both on campus and online is the same. And in terms of the majors, then you would have 5 instead of the 4. adding finance responsible investment, as which would be now, which we will introduce today, sustainable finance and digital innovation in the coming month. Then for those of you interested also in a shorter, it depends, but shorter courses, more focus, it's possible also to study just the module of specialization through the Certificate of Advanced Studies. It's a program that you can complete within 5 to 11 months if you do it on campus, or between 6 to 12 months if you do it online. You choose 3 of the module that would be of specialization, and that give you the same access as an MBA or master students because you're taking the same exact classes. The intakes are the same, 4 times a year online and twice a year on campus. This would also allow a lot of flexibility in your studies while still gaining additional knowledge on the sustainability component of our courses. And last but not least, we're also offering a doctorate of business administration with obviously a key focus on sustainability. So this is a 3-year program on campus, online. So it's done usually blended, and students would attend workshop to learn more about how to conduct a research, how to get the right tool, how to actually formalize a research topic that would blend the experience that they have acquired, as well as the interest that they have in sustainability. So it's really important to work on this different aspect, especially in our context of sustainability. So it's really enhancing the career prospect of our students, and it's really taking the lead on sustainability topics for our students. That's in short. I believe most of you have already had some general information about SUMAS. If that was not the case, just know that I'm still available for you if you have any question. Also, if you had any question, you can always put the question in the Q&A. So we already had one, and yes, so you had your question, I guess, answered, George. We do have a program at the doctorate level. If you need additional information, I'll be happy to explain in the next time. So now that would be for Mehmet to explain a bit. And well, I would say I'll leave the floor to you. And I think if you can give us already a quick introduction about yourself, where you come from, what you've done, and what you teach also for us at SUMAS.
Perfect.
Thank you, and warm welcome to you.
Well, thank you, Pascal. Thank you. And well, I am Mehmet Ulug, and I'm teaching this semester at the SUMAS in Milan campus. So basically, I give a range of courses starting from finance, which is for the bachelor's degree students. I give also statistics, and for the MBA courses, and also for the bachelor's, I give the biodiversity and international business. My background is a mix of econometrics, statistics, mathematical modeling, but my research interest lies in the intersection of the climate, sustainability, and environmental issues. And I apply for these concepts for the global economics that I bring them. I try to address all these issues in the very interdisciplinary approach. So I would love to start right now to share my screen so that I can see the slides here. So this is going to be the topic of today that I would like to share with you. And in the next 30 minutes and 40 minutes, that what I'm going to talk about, it's going to be financial investments in a transition to a low carbon economy. So just begin to starting, like when we are talking about the low carbon economy transitions from the fossil fuels to renewable, it's an ongoing debate. Basically, what I'm going to bring here to understanding what is the current debate that we have here, and how we bring the role of this finance when we are trying to give a understanding for the low carbon or decarbonization of the economy. So the outline of my presentation, as you see, it's I divided in 3 parts. The first part, it's going to be motivation. So what motivates us to look at this topic and to delve into more. And the second part, I'm going to bring the role of finance, which is going to be a crucial part that we are going to see in more detail, and then implications for the transition to a low carbon economy. So to start that, well, everybody knows that we are talking about the operations of the companies and the human activities, which is the most important issues of this 21st century. This is our starting point. And of course, the indicator of this environment, especially greenhouse gases and the carbon dioxide oceans that are generally accepted as the main cause of this climate change. So what we do is actually, we starting point, we make this 2015 Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals adopted under the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development market a starting point to address the destructive consequences of this climate change. The main message is clear, and everybody, I think, is agree on all these issues. First, to end global sport for fossil fuels, and then replace the funds for the cleaner energy, and finally keep the increase in global temperature below 1.5 degrees. But the problem is that here, when we look at the recent reports that come from the panel on the climate change, it documents that the global net CO2 emissions were higher than any previous time in human history during the decade 2010 and 2019, and global warming will likely exceed 1.5 based on their projection by 2030. The most important issue here is that when we are talking about this climate change, global warming, of course, its implications for the society, for the companies, for the governments, when fighting climate change is more urgent than ever. So the key question here, what we are trying to actually, why countries or governments are failing to decrease the emission level despite organization commitment to reducing emissions. And if you want to give a possible answer to these questions, of course, this is going to be the role of finance in fostering the transition toward climate mitigation and adaptation investments. So the most important part of this whole story that we have, which becomes a very global challenge for everyone, we know that very well the causes of climate change, and we even know the tools to fight against this climate change. They are well understood among all the scientists, intellectual community. The crucial role of this climate finance or financing emission reducing investments is in developing economies is not the same case, because it's not the same well that we believe that it's a little understood in the field. So to tackle the climate change requires this very urgent investments in the green transformation process when looking at the transition to a low carbon economy. And if you want to think about the governments and the companies that should strive to limit the warming 1.5 degrees to achieve an ultimate goal of the net zero greenhouse gas emissions by mid-century in order to mitigate the worst effects of the climate change. So basically, the reference point for us here and for the rest of my presentation to when we are talking about the transition to a low carbon economy, this is the hinges on these first steps. What we are trying to bring the concept of the global challenges that everybody agree on that we have something and we have this plan in order to tackle the climate change and the global warming. And as the technology continues to evolve, we expect a revision of the greenhouse gases reduction targets to stabilize a global economy working towards the net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So this slide is actually interesting that I bring from the most recent organization, the meetings that come from the COP27. And if we look at all these highlights that they had during this conference, it was all about finance, starting from the climate finance in a poly-crisis era, thinking about mobilizing finance for climate action, thinking about the cost of the green borrowing. It's all about the finance. And I think this finance day at the COP27, which happened in the recently highlighted that trillions of dollars worth of investments are needed each year to achieve the rapid, far-reaching transformation required to address the impact of climate crisis and to deliver on the objectives of the Paris agreements. Just to repeat what we are exactly trying to tell here, we make sure that the investors, corporations, and other capital markets participants will play a critical role in achieving the goals of the agreement reached at the COP27, which calls for transforming the financial system, which is the most important part, because the usual financial system is not the one that actually addresses the issues that we really need to transform or to tackle the climate change. To deliver the estimated 4 to 6 trillion annually that will be needed to decade beyond the for sustainable produced energy and the transition to a low carbon economy. So this was something that motivated us. We have an issue of the climate change. We have this green transformation process that requires an incredibly important energy or technological progress that should radically change so that we are able to actually address this issue. And now we bring the role of these financial systems. And here, and at the same time, we make sure that this finance and its role that has clear effects or influence into the low carbon economy, which is the structural economic changes which affect practically all economic sectors and activities, require a large scale mobilization of financial resources and therefore the involvement of the financial sector in generating financial flows to necessary investments projects. And if we think about the very recent developments, what is going on around the world, this is the war in Ukraine, for example. This is something that beyond the war that we have a lot of social problems with this, but at the same time, this make a clear point when we are talking about the security, especially energy security. And this brings us the role of if we have the renewable energy, that not to be dependent on the fossil fuels that actually that makes importantly, that makes a problem of increasing the problem of these tensions that we are facing nowadays. And the climate risk presents significant investment risks. This is not something that can escape. It carries financial impacts that will reverberate across all industries and the global markets, affecting long-term shareholder returns as well as economic stability. At present, there are various estimates based on different scenarios sector of the volume of financing needed to achieve the goal of net zero emissions by the mid-century. Now, I think this graph can tell us something really important. This graph directly comes from the IMF. This is the International Monetary Fund. And here, if you look at, and if you focus here, 2021 and arriving to nowadays, especially, this is the current condition of the financial flows. It's exactly even less than 1 trillion. What we need by the 2050 mid-century, this is almost 7 trillion. So we see that it's something very low actually when we are thinking about the amount of the financial flows that nowadays that we need in order to tackle the climate change. This is something that it summarizes what I'm telling to you. It does not enough to have this enormous amount of financial flows to improve the conditions for transition to low carbon economy. But what we have here is exactly the climate financing or sustainable finance or green finance is much smaller than what is needed. So that's the main thing. So we are here trying to understanding that what actually prevents money to flow or to channel into the climate finance here. And to summarize or to make up just this point, to have a big pictures, and this is not sufficient to achieve the climate goals that comes from the Paris Agreement or the most recent one, which was the COP27. So the main question here and all the next slides that we are going to focus on it is on these questions. What prevents money from flowing in greater volumes to green projects? And finally here that we delve into the implication of this low carbon economy, that we say that pulling money out of fossil fuels is only one part of the solutions. Why? Because if we aim towards a low carbon economy, this money then needs to be invested in green assets or in, for example, in renewable energies. But when we think about away from the fossil fuels to go to the renewable energies, then we have more questions to address. This is exactly in this program that has to be formulated, try to address all these questions so that we know that the role of finance when understanding the low carbon economy. So the first is going to be what are the obstacles preventing this today? Is the finance sector ready for this transition? Who has to work together to speed up the shift of the financial sector towards a more sustainable investment strategy? So the answer of all these questions in the next slides that I'm going to try address are, although that they are not in orders, but the rest of the slides basically is going to try to address all these questions, giving the possible answers. But before starting that part, do we really know what finance is, which is the really that if we think about in today's increasingly globalized financial world, an effective awareness of the relationship between financial system and the real economy requires a proper understanding of the nature of finance. So before arriving at that point, before making sure that the finance that plays an important role for the transition to low carbon economy, first we have to make sure that we know that the role of finance in the real economy. So basically here, if you consider the finance entails the distinguishing things that are too often confused, such as money and the credit. So the second question, before coming to the low carbon economy, again, to make sure what we understand when we ask the question, what is money? Here we look at the money as a structure of a credit and debt. And if we think about this structure that comes from the one side, credit, the other side is a debt, then we can think that money is a social relation of credit and debt denominated in a money of account. So here, the understanding of this money is always emerges as a debt. All money is essentially a credit, not the other way around. Here, basically that we conclude that the money is a promise and the production of a promise involves trust. This point is really important because we are delving into the money markets and we try to understand the money markets. We should know that the definition of the money is clear when we are addressing issues, loans, bonds, and all these things that we are trying to understand. And if we look at just the whole theory of money that comes from the endogenous money theory, this is all about credit, nothing but credit. A's money is B's debt to him, and when B pays his debt, A's money disappears. This is the entire theory of the money that when we are talking about money, especially in the financial systems. Now connecting to this, going back to the topic area, to make sure that finance, but at the same time, we try to make finance sustainable. And this sustainability can be relevant to all sectors, even in finance. And if we ask the question, what sustainable finance is exactly to achieving not only return, but also share the social benefit and economic and financial by reducing environmental risk and the inequality. Here, the sustainable finance that when we are thinking about the investment decision should definitely take into account a large environmental, social, and good governance relevant in the longer term. Now, the concept and the definition can be really wide and can be a little bit complicated. But if you look at here, the source that comes from the United Nations Economic Environmental Programs, which makes much more easier for us. If you look at this environmental development, that we see that actually there is social economic governance that comes from this ACG, that at the same time, the environmental consideration that has this climate change mitigation. And we see that there is a low carbon, climate green, socio-environmental, and sustainable. Sustainable finance can be a little bit much more higher than here, but here we just try to look at see the big pictures. When we are talking about the sustainable finance, we make sure that we link it with the environmental considerations. And if we think about, if we consider that all these three components that come from these environmental considerations, and if we think about social and the governance, they are all integrated part of the economic development and the sustainable finance. Now, this is just the summarize of the previous slide, but here, if you look at the third one, the governance of the public and the private institutions, which is going to be really important when trying to understanding how finance actually can play a role, because it's not just the public institution that can come together. There should be together co-work at the same time, including the criteria for the management structures, employee relations. The paid is key to ensuring the decision-making include the social environmental considerations. Now, I don't want you to focus here on the tail of here, but what we are trying to hear, we are talking about the climate transition and the role of the private and the public sectors. Basically, these are the main institutions that we can think that, for example, the central banks at the same time, other financial institutions but that has to work at the same time if bring the other part of the government institutions, even the municipalities, then and the other non-bank financial institutions such as institutional investors. So three things are here going to be very important. For example, if we look at credit and these demand relationships, the risk is going to be in the three parts. So the one risk can be a transition risk, which is going to be in the credit, that we can see that the credit that have lower valuation of assets in the collaterals. And if you look at on the market size, for example, the higher energy and the commodity prices, which exactly today that happens, that we have all these, that the energy prices, and especially if you think about the global inflations that come from these supply side disruptions and the energy shocks that we also have due to the war in the Ukraine, especially if we think about operational risk, that we also think about the high reputational risk by investing in the carbon intensive. This can be the same when we look at that the physical, but in a much more higher way, tangible way. So the problem is here, and if you look at in a very big picture, thinking about the macroeconomics, not only just restricting ourselves, trying to think, understanding this finance and its role for the low carbon economy, there is a trap here. This is what's called a climate investment trap. If you look at here, the high cost of capital, this is exactly what actually that influence, that have a lot of impact on the investments. And this directly translates into low investment in the low carbon technologies. And this, of course, translates into the low reduction on the carbon emissions, and it makes worse climate impacts. And this is kind of a loop when you have these things. And of course, you have high instability, high unemployment, low productions, and this leads to underdeveloped financial market, high domestic risk, and it becomes self-fulfilling the spiral that leads to the high risk premiums. Something that comes that we are trying to also to convert here, but the same things that as I said in the previous slides. Now here, that what I want to try to tell you something really much important. I bring the role of the central bank. I do believe that the central bank, which is the monetary policy tool that comes from, which is the main actor in the financial systems, without looking at the central bank monetary policy, especially interest rate settings, which is going to be something a misleading looking at the financial investments, regardless of if it considers the environment or not. For example, if you think about the monetary policy, the central bank may play a crucial role by setting the cost of investments. This is exactly that comes from the interest rates, because interest rates here we are talking is the price of money. And if they set the price of money, we should think that this directly impacts on the investments, and if these investments go to on the low carbon economy. And the example that makes us much more clear, rising interest rate, which happens today all over the world, all central banks all in the world right now, they increase the interest rates, right? And if you think about rising interest rates for fighting inflation, may make the transition to a low carbon economy more complex and expensive. I think this is one of the major things that happens nowadays. Today, if you think about the role of financial investments into the transition to a low carbon economy. Why? Because this is because of the cost of the credit is directly associated with the interest rate decisions by central banks. And increasing this interest rate will slow down the investment in green projects, thereby disrupting the support for the transition to low carbon economy. Another important point, which the literature and all these intellectual that places and organizations, conference that they came together, they ignore this point, but this is one of the most important pillar of these financial investments when we are trying to channeling into the low carbon economies. This is the greening collateral frameworks is another important part. And with this the collateral framework, the central bank basically can introduce a greening criteria in their existing framework and helping to achieve environmental targets. But the problem is today we don't have these collateral frameworks, and they do not address such criteria, and they suffer from a lack of environmental considerations. But if we think about that, a central bank operating under the collateral frameworks, they perform their core liquidity operations and collateral, which is a financial assets, and they define a collateral to be eligible or governing its eligibility directly affects the cost of borrowing and liquidity conditions across the whole financial systems. And with this collateral, if they are able to make it, and if we think about the financial assets, especially the value of the financial assets, and if you are going even something beyond this, we can think about something, for example, a repo markets. Why? Because these repo markets, one side has a cash, the other side has a collateral, which is exactly the security that we are thinking. And if you bring the role of the central bank that can directly influence on the credit conditions and the real economic activity by changing or modifying their collateral framework, this is something that is going to be enormous impact on the low carbon economy. So thinking about all these problems that we can have in the financial system that prevent money to be channeled into the low carbon economy investments, how we are going to invest responsibly, how we are going to make sure that we can channel this big amount of flows to be called like financial flows, how to be invest responsibly, that they take into consider all these environmental considerations. The first thing I think that, for example, you can favor the most responsible issues within an asset universe or category or sector or class, or focus on one or more aspects. For example, climate change, energy efficiency, or even health, because the COVID-19 was something recently that hit actually that makes us not only just thinking about this was a health crisis, it was also something, an incredibly important, a global economic shocks that led to the supply side disruptions that we still have to try to deal with the problems following the COVID-19. And if you select the investments that comply with the international standards, for example, with the OECD or United Nations environmental programs, with these regulations, can be even much more highly efficient and deepen the dialogue with the company, especially if you are thinking about sustainability issues, including a shareholder, for example, to positively influence its behaviors. So just specifically trying to go into the more detail when trying to understand actual financial flows, where they do come from. This is exactly that brings us to think about the role of the bank credit. Why? Because the sustainability for a bank is also closely connected to the credit. And here we have to make this the importance of these commercial banks. They have this special ability to create credit in the act of the lending. This goes to something against to the conventional view of the bank lending, because they do not need actually any pre-deposits or from savers in order to create loan for the sake of lending. And if you think about 4 years now, the banking industry has been committed to adopting the measures to facilitate access to credit, to support the families or business when they have the difficulty, by complying with provisions of specific regulations, by defining voluntary initiatives, and in conjunction with the institutions, consumer associations, and business associations, by adopting a highly synergetic approach. But here that also we can add that microcredit can also be an important tool, especially if we think about to have the business to get access to credit when they would otherwise be at risk of exclusions. But banks are always seeking to expand their range of products. So we do not talk into detail about what products are, but we are going to just touch exactly to get the point. Services to meet the needs of customers when they are trying to link it with the sustainability. And this can take in the form of, for example, funding to promote the purchase of energy efficient houses. This is something really new, but the banks are really ready for this. They are oriented with all their services and products. For example, innovations to improve the energy efficiency of buildings, so-called green mortgages, and sustainability focused investment products such as the ESG, the mutual funds, and the green bonds. This part is actually, it's very important, but we do not delve into the issues of these green bonds, but we have to make sure that, which is the most important also part of thinking about sustainable finance, especially looking at the implication for the low carbon economy. Here, it's a very complicated chart that you can see. This does not only include the banks, but also focuses other non-bank financial institutions, such as special purpose vehicles, security dealers, money market funds. So if you are thinking about this complex, many sectors, actors, players, services that we have here, the only thing that we can focus here, between these actors, there is always flows of the finance. So there is deposits, there is loans, there is deposits. So these flows that makes us to think that actually should be channeled at the end of the day into the low carbon economy. So the financial sector has this capacity. The most important thing here to make sure that we are able to mobilize all these capital market, wholesale money market, retail money markets, that we can have this big picture of the financial system, making sure that support to the transition into the low carbon economy. So I'm almost finishing my slides, but this is something that I would like to just summarize. This is International Energy Agency that describes that 5 ways for finance to accelerate the net zero clean energy transitions. And here what they are trying to underscore, the finance must rapidly reduce fossil fuel funding, but it must also fund the development of new technologies and promote the global deployment of clean energy. So the first way for finance to address or to support or to help all these net zero clean energy transitions, which has clear implications for the transition to low carbon economy. This is other side of this, thinking about in a macro way. First, to leave behind these fossil fuels, basically to say goodbye to coal. Second, stop financing fossil fuel expansions. So the address actually should be transition away from this financing fossil fuels toward the clean energy, and to make sure and all this energy and these investments that actually go to in the new technological innovations progress untapped for clean tech, and support the transition in developing economies, and make sure that the financial institutions, if you think about the global way, they seize the opportunity. So concluding all these things, what we're trying to say here with this program, bringing these 2 different parts, finance and these environmental considerations, but we know that there is an incredibly important link between them. There are so many ties that should be explored, but the first thing we should know that finance is crucial for the green energy transitions. That's the main starting point that we are trying to say. But accessing to low-cost finance, which we already explored through the central bank, especially collateral framework, and the deep financial institutions, not only bank, but also other financial institutions, is uneven as the cost of capital differs if you change the region, if you change the financial markets, and if you go to the different financial institutions, and if you are going to applying for different services and the products. But in the ongoing debate on the need for the transition towards a decarbonized economy and the actions that should be undertaken by central banks, financial authorities, and the governments, and the role of bank and bond market, we did not talk about the bond market financing is important for all these implications that is we are going to attribute to the transition to low carbon economy. Basically, finance here could play an important role in terms of channeling all these funds away from fossil fuels and polluting types of activities, investing in greener activities. That's something that we can add more, but for the moment, actually, we see that the role of finance actually translating in all these things that can have a lot of consequences for the sustainability issues, especially thinking about these low carbon economy implications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very kind of comprehensive.
Yeah.
As I see that there's already a few questions. So as I was reminding all of you, if you have any question, any comment, well, we'll pick up the question. I don't know if you actually see them. You probably see them in the Q&A, Mehmet, or otherwise I will read them out loud. But the first question was with a forecast of global economic recession and ongoing Russia in Ukraine impacting business globally. How do you see the impact on the investment, on sustainability? And the comment that was made is because obviously we see government industries pushing back sustainability initiative, investment, and investing on conventional high carbon emission tech and projects. So,
well, I think that's a great question. So it should be like something that everybody should ask themselves and try to answer these questions. But my understanding, which I'm writing paper on it, I'm almost finishing, which I enjoy this question that it's addressed. We have to make it clear what the question is. The question shouldn't be forecast the recessions. The entire global economy, in my view, it's already entered in the recessions. So why, if you're looking at the central banks in all over the world, if at the same time they all increase the interest rate in response to or for fighting inflations, this means that there is something that we have to deal with. Because the problem is that it's not that these demand side issues. We have these supply problems that come from the war. What supply problem is exactly the gas, the electricity supply shocks, the food prices, that we have all these problems. And this was exactly clear, for example, for the most recent the meeting, it was COP27. They were actually trying to address all these issues, but at the same time, we have these global challenges and the problems and the recessions. They are even not able to actually increase the amount of money for the last year that they were trying to pledge. So I think it has a lot of implications, effects, and the problem is that it's a very uncertain. We don't know when these things are going to end up. So that's the main thing, the main uncertainty. But definitely has a lot of effects when we are talking about the low carbon economy transitions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Because what you're mentioning with the COP27 Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt, like they had a hard time already holding the line from Glasgow from last year, and pretty much the only outcome, if there's one, it's that fund for damage loss that was pushed by Pakistan due to their recent flood. But that's really just what the pledge that was made is literally a fraction of the damage that would happen every year. So that was better than nothing. But as you said, it's clearly not enough when there was like a lot of decision about fossil fuel reduction and actually kind of banning all of this. But yeah, that was not done.
Just the one thing that I can add, increasing interest rate by the entire central banks in the world right now is not going to bring more gas to the Europe, for example, is not going to bring more energy for any country that have dealing with these problems, is not going to have to any supply disruption, for example, food prices right now that we have because of the war. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a major implications for the entire world, not only just that we have these global challenges, thinking about climate change.
Yeah, that's another challenge. Second question, that was, what are your suggestions to mitigate the risk of the financing being used for greenwashing?
Right. Well, this is also an ongoing debate. So I would expect that there should be more regulations when bringing these new concepts. But I think the financial system is too busy with their usual activities. For example, if you are thinking about the banking systems, we do not leave banking system to be the same way that we look at the banks. Why? Because these banks, they completely change. There is a complete transformations away from a commercial banking system to the non-bank financial institutions. For example, these money market funds, broker dealers, pension funds, hedge funds. So the more that they involve in this concept that, for example, greenwashings, there should be more clear regulations to make sure that how they tackle, for example. So here we do not have a right answer, for example, from the financial system, which is going to be a sharp distinction between these banks or other non-bank financial institutions, who is going to tackle this and what regulations is going to be behind. Basically, we do not have any answer for any of them right now.
I'll just add one thing,
Right,
because the Swiss, obviously being Swiss,
right,
they went a bit faster. So there, I think there was from the FINMA, the regulation agency on the financial market in Switzerland, they did publish something. I think there was a note about it's literally like what we call greenwashing in the context of finance. They call eco money laundering.
right,
Uh, so they are starting to try and have more transparency on
right,
this, but you see, like, that's one country out of how
right.
many? Okay, Switzerland, it's still a
Yeah,
great country for finance, but it's not the main leaders.
right,
You would still have some of the great bank, but yeah.
right,
So
right.
eco money laundering is definitely still a problem.
I agree. I agree with that when you are saying that Switzerland, the case of Switzerland is definitely different. For example, thinking about the largest financial corporations located in the Switzerland, for example, Credit Suisse is
Mhm.
one of the largest financial institutions. Of course, when something happened to the financial systems, if financial system came across to any new concept like greenwashing, the first corporations that we look at is the corporations,
Mhm.
for example, in Switzerland, like Credit Suisse, for example, nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also because they are, well, I don't know if they were the first. I'll probably be wrong if I say that, but they were some of the first having that ESG fund or a green fund that were created. And definitely that drive also people that invest, because
Right,
it's part of a portfolio that's a green portfolio,
right,
but we don't really know
right.
what's been inside.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. What is your opinion about replacing fossil fuel by renewable energy when major oil and gas organizations are buying all the startups that would be coming up?
Yeah, I think if you look at, for example, this the COP27, the major participants, they were these major fossil lobbies.
Mm.
They were the people actually giving the directions of the climate change or whatever that we are going to take it into actions, thinking about staying away from the fossil fuels. For me, in my personal understanding, that it's almost impossible to replace fossil fuels with the cleaner energy. There should be a time that we actually respect, or to following this time. Up until that, we are ready to instruct to make sure that we have all this investment in the technology,
Mhm.
that we are able to produce energy that we need, because energy is everywhere in the productions, and if you are thinking about in the household level. So everything that we do that generating these actually these greenhouse gases, and nowadays that comes from the fossil fuels. I think there should be a clear time, stay away from the fossil fuels, so that we make sure that we have enough investments to have this clean energy, that we extract the energy need that nowadays we all think.
Mhm. So yes, basically what you're saying, COP27, definitely, like,
Yeah,
if you look at the account on climate activists and
yeah,
NGOs that were present, like, a lot of
right,
them were saying it was
right.
not feeling very safe for them to actually
No,
discuss anything.
right,
But yeah, well, uh, the only thing I could probably add is definitely these big players try to appear more green than they are, and
mhm,
probably, I don't know, I'll be devil's advocate there, but probably it's moving the right way in
right,
them actually buying this startup. But
right,
the thing is, what do you do? Because usually startup, you acquire them for the technology that goes
right.
with it. If you don't do anything with the technology, then what's the point?
One thing maybe we can also add in addition to this, for example, thinking about the renewable energy, the nuclear power is also bringing in renewable energy, but use of nuclear energy and the purpose behind should be clearly indicated. For example, we should
Mm.
not let like any country that they do produce a nuclear for the sake of the renewable energy, because we know the actual purpose of the nuclear energy can go in another directions to even increase more pollutions if they are trying to make this army aspect of the stuffs, let's say.
Yeah. Okay, next one. Why would the World Bank group still invest in fossil fuel system?
Yeah.
That's what I
So yeah. So can you repeat the question about the bank?
So I'm not sure if we're talking about the World Bank or the IMF. Why are they still investing in the fossil fuel system? I
Right.
think that's kind of connecting to the answer you've said earlier is because we can't just all transition at the same time. Well,
Mhm.
especially I would say in Europe,
Right.
probably we could pivot,
Mhm.
but at some expense.
Right, right. So we have to be clear again when we are talking about which institution should involve in this transition or transformation process. If you let only to private institutions, which they are only profit maximizations, either banks or the companies, of course, they wouldn't care so much
Mm,
about sustainability issues, but looking at how to bring more money in the sense that how to increase their performance so that they earn more. So I think the role of the public, especially the government, is a crucial here, not to let the companies or the banks to do more investments or any renewable infrastructure. So they should have more clear role. We should make they should ensure us that this is not only at the hand of the private institutions. I think that's the main thing. That's the
mm,
main thing. The second thing is the global challenges. The developments right now are going on here in Europe, for example, very simple, without thinking about the entire world.
mm.
People do not look for something to be renewable right now because the need is energy, wherever it comes, regardless of the sources that you are having. They
Right.
do not look for the source to be green or to be sustainable or to be renewable because they need energy and they are trying to meet these energy needs. That's why the banks and other corporations invest in these fossil fuel sources, let's say, and they are earning more money.
Yeah, it's a hard transition depending on the condition you're living in.
Yeah.
Next one. So I guess talking about Credit Suisse actually drove the question. Due to the ongoing recession, banks are
Right.
clearly having a tough time in managing their assets and books. Case in point, Credit Suisse, still trying hard to survive. So they've been kind of rocked with multiple scandals and change
Right.
management, and focusing on sustainable investment might not be their top priority at the moment.
Mhm.
So what is your take on such scenario? Because yeah, Credit Suisse is going
Yeah.
not too good at the moment, but do you think that that's, I don't know, for me it's like it probably
Mhm.
be a good time to turn around the business and to be one of the first to be
Yeah.
the most or the greenest.
Yes. Well, that's also an interesting question if you are making a case point about Credit Suisse. So Credit Suisse, in about a month ago, was almost collapsed, but
Mhm.
the Federal Reserve did not let this Credit Suisse to be collapsed, but they were almost the same with the global financial crisis 2008. But this time in the world as a global economy, we had enough experience not to let these companies to collapse because they have like a big impacts on the rest of the economy, especially like a global economy. It was the Swiss central banks basically that they have funds from the Federal Reserves and these funds channeled to the Credit Suisse so that they increase their asset values because there was a panic in the market. Basically, all investors who already invest in the asset that comes from the Credit Suisse, they try to sell. When they try to sell their assets, the value of the asset that Credit Suisse has, it completely went down. So when it went down, this actually led fire sale. Credit Suisse has this big problem, but it was really the central banks and the Federal Reserve did not let. So going back to the questions that what I'm thinking right now, I do not expect that the Credit Suisse has going to have a lot of trouble, but this is because it's a major corporations. They still have the liquidity to cover their losses, but these are big losses. But if you are thinking about sustainability issues, it's not just connected with these big corporations. It's all about the investors actually that invest in the asset of this Credit Suisse. If the investors looking for something to be sustainable or green, this should reflect directly the value of the asset, which is exactly the collateral, what I was talking during my presentation.
Yeah, clearly, like now, Credit Suisse is very much in a critical moment of their life. So that's few thing, like between banks are always valued, and that's something you pointed. It's trust you have in the institution because they're holding the money. So it's always a trust on the position that they're currently holding and kind of risk aversion or risk avoidance that they would have. It's always a matter of finding out what they would be doing. But if you say if investors don't trust the place where the money is invested, then that's big trouble. But I would say once again, like to take that scenario, clearly that may not be their main issue at the moment. But that could also be a good time to transition. But the key thing for such a bank and institution is removing your position, like removing liquidating the position that you have at the moment, and actually taking the loss, realizing they lost their money, which may clearly not encourage investor to give them more money.
One more thing for the Credit Suisse, so that we make sure that we know everything about the Credit Suisse. So the difference between the Credit Suisse and any other banks, the Credit Suisse is so-called non-bank financial institutions. Basically, it's an investment fund. So they do everything in the sake of intermediating capital, that you can think about this capital is in the form of the credit. The difference of the banks do not intermediate the capital. They create the credit itself. So that's a major thing between these large corporations and if you're thinking about the traditional way of commercial banking.
Right. Perfect. I don't know if we have any more question. Well, if there's no more question, we can wrap up here. It's perfect. We're almost exactly time. So everyone has been respecting the time given. We will still have time for another question if there's one. If there's none, thank you very much, Mehmet, for taking part. Appreciate the help and the information being shared. Was very insightful. For everyone attending today, thank you very much for taking part. I hope that you found it as insightful as I did. And if you have any additional question, feel free to revert to us. And then I'll be happy to answer question if you have any about the program or anything. Talking to you soon. Thank you again. Have a nice evening or nice day, depending from where you're coming in. Talk to you soon. And just one final thing for those that would still be thinking of making an application or doing your application. Sorry, that's my part. There's still time. We're running a specific offer at the moment for the Green Friday. So for application that would be done this week, so until Sunday. So if you have any question, contact your recruiter or get back in touch by email and we'll help you in the next few steps. Talk to you soon. Take care. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.